Hello and welcome to Trust Your Glitter. This is Christy. I am here. We're going to have a little chat about the astrology between November the 5th and November the 12th. So daylight savings time ends today, November 5th. On my last podcast, I have some reflection questions based on today's last quarter moon in the sign of Leo. And that takes place at 3:37 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So super early in the morning, we work with this last quarter moon. And if you want some lunar reflections, just go on back to the last episode titled Saturn Direct. And at the end of the episode, I have reflection questions, writing prompts for this lunar cycle. So this week is going to be I called it a Mercury-Mars-tastic week. And it's not that we have down days this week. We have movement in the sky. We have discussions in the collective that continue to go on. And we have actions that, whether we like them or not, will be taking place. And these actions could even be declarations that we've needed to make in our own lives. And what this week is doing is actually preparing us as we are leaving the eclipse cycle of 2023. We are also preparing for a very vibrant and talkative Scorpio new moon, which is very not like the sign, not like the stereotypical ideas of what the sign of Scorpio is about. So it's interesting because as we head into this week, we're getting ready to change astrological seasons in the upcoming few weeks. And this Scorpio season is one that keeps on giving. So even as we'll be heading into Sagittarius season, we're still going to have Scorpio lessons that'll come later, and I'll talk about that on future episodes. But right now, we have a lot going on with Mercury in the sign of Scorpio, Mars in the sign of Scorpio, and then on November 8th, Venus, who has been in the sign of Virgo, actually changes signs and goes into the balance scale sign of Libra. So again, the lessons of our previous astrological seasons continue to bring us gifts, I would say, whether it's cognitive gifts or just these recognitions in our lives. And I think, I really like this week for Mars and Venus because Venus is happy in Libra. She is home. It is one of her home zodiac signs, being both Libra and Taurus. And with Jupiter in Taurus and Uranus in Taurus, there's a lot of activity going on with these planets. So on November 6th, Venus, who's still in Virgo, is trine Pluto in Capricorn. On the same exact day, Mercury in Scorpio is in a tense connection called a quincunx to the North Node in Aries. So this day will open up the week with, I would like to say, some very real unpeeling in our lives. Something has been chafing off. I don't like the word chafing, but I'm going to use the word chafing. We are exfoliating something in our lives. And with Venus trine Pluto, this gives us all a chance to look at this from a very earthy perspective. There's a lot of abundant energy. And with Pluto being the underworld planet and us just going through and still going through transits of the underworld with Scorpio energy in the sky, this is us taking back our power in certain ways. And as the week goes on, with November 8 having Venus enter Libra after this beautiful trine, we also have a connection between Mercury in Scorpio trine Neptune in Pisces. This says, these could be messages from crossed over loved ones. This is also those messages that, this week we didn't, if you were doing any Samhain work or Dia de los Muertos work, anything like that where you're honoring your ancestors, those messages are still potent. And I really do think that the rest of 2023, which is the year of the Chariot, are these spiritual downloads. Or in the numerology year of 7, we have November, December left. And this particular bracket of time is giving us some very synchronistic energies, which is preparing us for 2024, which is a year of strength and abundance. And I'll get into that as well as we head into, year ahead episodes and just looking at what 2024 is really here to bring us. But November 8th is one of those days we just want to circle, because when Venus enters Libra and this Mercury trine Neptune and Pisces, there's also a beautiful sextile between Mercury and Pluto. So it's not that Pluto's active this week, it's just that connections to Pluto are extremely active. And with all these Mercury connections this week, there are distinct conversations being had. And we're going to see this on a political scale continued. We're going to see this in our lives continued, and it's very therapeutic. It's very necessary. It's very meant to be. It can feel like you are connecting to somebody on a level of, oh my God, I just thought about you and you just texted me or emailed. Those are the kinds of conversations that are up in the sky this week. And on the same day, November 8th, the sun in Scorpio is quincunx Chiron in Aries. And we want to take note of any time Chiron gets some friction. So with the sun being the ego, that energy of the ego, and Chiron being the wounded healer, it can be a deep cut. It can be like, I'm really looking at this like I had my best intentions here and still got wounded. And that's okay. That's part of life. Life in a lot of ways is a living ceremony for us all, a living ritual. I did Sarah Jenks' ritual. I did all 3. And I think the last podcast I did was I was on either 1 or 2 of her ceremonies. And then we finished out with the 3rd one this week. And I truly recommend it. I think all her replays are up on her website. But I did kind of sit in meditation this week and really sat with an ancestor altar and really appreciated, all the messages of those who have crossed in my life. I've known so many people over the years who have impacted me in such a big way, who are not here on this planet. And I'm so grateful for them. But the deep cut that comes from that ancestral knowledge, that wisdom, it could even be, say you really love somebody and they're crossed over and you just have these things that pop up and you're like, oh, I wish they were here. And I could tell them this is this happened. Just know that with this connection between the sun and Chiron, you might be in that space where you really want to tell somebody something. You really want to express, the sun wants to express some big things, some big energy. With Chiron and a quincunx that day, there can be a little bit of not being seen for the absolute truth that day, not being seen for your biggest self-expression. So I want to acknowledge that, because the 8th is also a day where Venus is going home. She's going into her home sign. The other positive aspect is Mars in Scorpio is in one of his home signs. So Mars and Venus on the 8th are actually extremely in happy places. And Mars has been in a happy place since Mars entered Scorpio as well. But there's been some deep work that has gone along with that as well. Another date to circle this week is November 10th. Mercury, chatty Mercury, who's been in many connections this week, and some of them are very etherical connections, enters the sign of Sagittarius. Now, we had Saturn go direct on the 4th. So one of the things that I really like is when Mercury enters Sagittarius, this is a square between Mercury and Saturn. This puts us in a square with the chatty planet, the trickster planet, and Saturn, who has given us these lessons since mid-June in Pisces and now wants us to go towards our purpose. So I really reflected on this because a lot of pop astrology talks about how squares are difficult and hard. And one thing to note, if you're listening and you are in the United States, this square is going to make an appearance with the US Thanksgiving. So we're going to see this square, but it's with the Sun and Saturn around Thanksgiving time for the United States. And for everybody, we're going to see this square in a couple of weeks when we enter Sagittarius season again. So one thing to take note of is November 10th has like a repeat or has like a rewind or a redo or a recap in not a retrograde way, but in a way where it was like certain information was only known on this date. And then a couple weeks from now, we get kind of a bigger, more Sagittarian story on this. So there's like, that Jupiterian expansion. So if you're waiting on news for something, you might have like putting paperwork on this day, or you get kind of just enough of it, just enough of the story, but you don't get the full story until around Thanksgiving. And for those who are going into family holiday season, these squares can be tense with the paternal side of the family, or the more restrictive family situations are up for a little bit of a push and pull. So for those making family plans for holidays, this can be that egos are just starting to show themselves, like the drama. Not saying Sagittarius is a sign of drama, but Sagittarius is a fire sign and is very much like here to make the community a better place, wants to share, wants to bring love. So does the sign of Pisces. But with Mercury square Saturn, it really depends on how healthy the situation is. So if you're listening and you're like, oh gosh, the family text thread is vibrant, it's lively, and it got livelier around the 10th, that is kind of what's happening with the square. You really have to discern. You really have to try and set limits and boundaries with Mercury and Sagittarius, because Mercury and Sagittarius will say anything and everything and all the things. So if you're in a family text thread and you're getting ready for holiday plans, whether it's you're in the US and doing Thanksgiving, or you're getting ready for the end of the year, I would say this is a really important timing between the 10th, 11th, 12th, and even into the 13th to start really intentionally practicing self-boundaries. And so that square doesn't say like, oh, restricted conversations. What I'm seeing is you restricting the conversation based on the lessons of Mercury going through Scorpio. There's a lot of inner work that happened during Mercury in Scorpio, and a lot of really important self-insights. And because we had these eclipses in such a strong Scorpio-Taurus connection over these last few years, this is the test. Did you pass? Did you pass the North and South Node in Scorpio Taurus test as we go into owning your authority and power and getting through codependent relationships? So this week brings us these little, like, not foreshadowings, but kind of like sprinkles this in, just lets us know. And also circle the 11th Mars, who is still in Scorpio, is opposite Uranus, who's retrograde at 21 degrees Scorpio, opposing Uranus at 21 degrees Taurus. This is a little chaos, a little added, a little glisten, a little bit of like, okay, we're preparing and this is also important to note because this is our new moon connection. We're going to have this influence next week because next week we're going to have a new moon in the sign of Scorpio, and it's going to be unpredictable surprises. I want to say it's in a good way, but I also need to be very practical when I look at, the nature of Scorpio, the nature of what's happening in the world, the nature of big energies, and the fact that Mercury is now going into a fire sign with Mars still kind of in this stingy sign of Scorpio. I think about the scorpion and the frog, and, in a lot of ways, it's like you are going up the hill with the scorpion, and the scorpion, or going across the pond with the scorpion, and the scorpion says, hey, just get on my back, we'll swim across the pond. And at the end, the frog who was carried across the pond gets stung by the scorpion, and the scorpion goes, it's in my nature. So we have to look at this opposition between Mars, who's in, like, Mars is that stingy action, the soldier, the warrior. Looking at Uranus and being like, we've got some big energies here. I don't want to use the word explosive, but it's the best I can do right now based on what I'm feeling. So we've got to look at the nature of this opposition. My Sagittarius moon wants to be like, no, it's all hearts and flowers and rainbows, and we're going to vibe through it. And we're going to like totally be a cohesive society. And the highest, lightest form of it is total societal transformation. And we're all going towards light and love. But if we look at like everybody's pattern of evolution, this can also be, one of those things that's on a grander scale. And with that, between the 11th, 12th, and 13th, this is something this week is getting us ready for. So next week's episode will be all about this new moon. I'll have reflection questions. But this week, it's just to observe, pay attention, see what conversations are going on in your family, in your friend circle, in the collective, and really just kind of take note at specific days. What's going on the 5th for you? What's going on the 8th for you? What's going on the 10th and 11th? Take note. And then as we head into next week, it's going to make a lot more sense. A lot of these, again, Saturn is putting some big puzzle pieces together. And now we're kind of putting around the outer frame as we head out of 2023. We're getting that frame together. And this week, I would say, is about that framework. So I want to say thank you so much for listening to Trust Your Glitter. You can find me on all social media, Christy Belich. I am on TikTok, Instagram, I'm on the Facebook Threads, and this podcast is on Spotify, all of the places you can find podcasts, and also I am now on YouTube. So thank you so much for listening. For the rest of 2023, I'm going to be doing 10% off all readings. You can find that on my Linktree. I will post that in the show notes. And all of my readings are 10% off. I also do holiday packages. So if you want to get a reading for a family member or friend, just let me know. There is a booking form on my Linktree, and say that this is for somebody else. You would love to purchase a reading for them. And if they want an astrology reading, just their consent based on their birthday information. So thank you so much. Have an amazing, amazing week, and take care.